Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the referendum isn't the only vote looming on the horizon. Before the EU vote on June the 23rd, voters across the UK will get a chance to cast their ballot in a range of elections early next month. So what's at stake? There are 7 sets of elections happening in May, all of which will take place on the same day, Thursday, May the 5th. Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland will hold national elections. There are 60 seats up for grabs in the Welsh Assembly. The Scottish Parliament, in which the SNP has held a majority since 2011, will elect 129 members. And in Northern Ireland there are 108 seats, which will be decided for representatives to the Assembly at Stormont. Across England there are local government elections. 124 councils have seats up for election. 35 metropolitan councils, 19 unitary authorities and 70 district councils. And 4 cities in England will elect mayors: London, Bristol, Liverpool and Salford. Londoners will also elect members to the London Assembly, with 25 seats available. And finally, voters in 41 police force areas in England and Wales will elect a police and crime commissioner. And joining me now from Glasgow is our election guru, Professor John Curtis of Strathclyde University. John, let's start with the local elections in England. How should we judge the performance of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party in these elections?
Well, the first thing we have to appreciate that the seats that are up for grabs on May the 5th in these elections were last fought for the most part 4 years ago. Now, it so happens that 4 years ago, we're looking back at the time at George Osborne's so-called omnishambles budget, when support for the Conservative Party began to fall away. And in truth, these were the one and only set of local elections during the last Parliament where the Labour Party began to put in a performance that you might think they might be capable of winning the next election. So Mr Corbyn's misfortune is he's defending not a brilliant baseline, but he's defending a relatively good one. Labour around 6 or 7 points ahead, as judged by their share of the vote. Now, the truth is, Mr Corbyn is not 6 or 7 points ahead in the opinion polls at the moment, though, in contrast to what we might have expected a few weeks ago, he is no longer 6 or 7 points behind. He now, Labour and Conservative, seem to be quite close to each other, but that still means that in practice, Mr Corbyn may well be facing net losses. The figure of 150 has been batted around. That looks not unreasonable. Will that be good? Well, better than it might have been a few weeks ago. Is it the kind of performance that would persuade you the Labour Party is on course to win the election in 2020? Certainly not.
Do you agree, John, that the biggest threat to Mr Corbyn's leadership would be to lose London, and that seems unlikely?
I agree that it's unlikely, and I would also agree with you that if Labour were to fail to win the London mayoral election, that would be a serious reverse for Labour. We should bear in mind that back in 2012, although Boris Johnson won the London mayoral election, the Labour Party was clearly ahead in the parallel London Assembly election, and Mr Johnson only won that election because of his considerable personal popularity. The truth is that neither Sadiq Khan, the Labour candidate, nor Zach Goldsmith, the Conservative candidate, has the same kind of charisma and attractiveness to voters. Therefore, London should run in line with roughly the overall popularity of the parties. Labour did relatively well in London 12 months ago, so if Mr Khan were not to win that election, then Labour really would have questions to ask itself.
John, I would suggest that a bad performance in Scotland has already been priced in for Labour. But could Labour even come third behind the Scottish Tories?
The answer to is that they could. There's another opinion poll out this morning that put Labour and the Conservatives neck and neck with each other. Has to be said that most polls still put Labour a little bit ahead of the Conservatives, but not by much. But certainly Labour look as though they're heading for a very poor performance, maybe no more than 20% of the vote. That would be their worst ever result in any kind of election since and including 1918. But in truth, I won't think it tell you anything very much about Jeremy Corbyn and his popularity. We do now have to remember that what happens in Scotland is now very distinct and separate for what happens in the rest of the UK. And the election in Scotland is primarily going to be yet again framed by people's views about independence. The truth is the overwhelming majority of people who voted for independence in September 2014 are still determined to vote for the SNP, and for so long as that remains the case, Labour is going to struggle north of the border. But it has all to do with Scottish politics and very little to do with what's happening in the rest of England and Wales.
Is there really a UKIP surge in Wales? And if there is, why?
Well, certainly the opinion polls suggest that UKIP are doing relatively well in Wales, around 15-16% of the vote, but that in truth is roughly where the opinion polls are putting UKIP across Britain as a whole. But what we have to remember is that in Wales, as in Scotland, indeed as in the London Assembly election, the elections are being held by proportional representation, not by first past the post. And therefore, if UKIP can simply get the 15-16% that the opinion polls suggest they might get, then they will indeed get significant representation in the Welsh Assembly. That said, getting UKIP right is perhaps one of the things on which the polls tend to disagree with each other. Maybe UKIP won't do quite so well as that, and therefore, as a result, I think they're almost bound to get some seats, but maybe won't necessarily do as well as the party is currently hoping.
And finally, John, Northern Ireland in our tour d'horizon of the UK. I mean, the executive almost collapsed there last year. Will that turmoil in Stormont, is that likely or expected to change people's voting patterns this time?
We're not expecting a vast change in Northern Ireland. And again, we have to remember not only is the Assembly elected proportionally, but so is the Executive. Some evidence from polling, limited though it very much as it is in the province, that maybe both the DUP, the larger of the two unionist parties, and Sinn Féin, the larger of the two nationalist parties, may not be quite so strong this time than last time. But as ever in Northern Ireland, nobody's expecting very much in the way of a major change.
John Curtis in Glasgow, thanks for joining us on the Sunday Politics. Nick Watt, let me come to you. These elections are widely being seen as Mr Corbyn's first serious electoral test. What are Labour's real expectations on May the 5th?
I think the real expectations is they're going to do really badly in Scotland, but as you say, that's priced in. They're going to do badly in Wales, but they're expecting that. They know that they won't admit it, that they could do very, very badly in the English local elections, as John was saying there, and that they could actually lose seats. If the Labour Party lost seats in these local elections, it would be the first time since 1985 that an opposition party had suffered losses in local elections in a non-general election year. So it would be really bad. So what it is all down to, at the end of the day, I know we shouldn't be London-centric. Great picture of Glasgow behind John Curtis there reminds us we shouldn't be London-centric, but it is down to London. Jeremy Corbyn needs one win, and it looks like he will get one win, and that will be Sadiq Khan in London, and that will probably be enough
so just
to
to be clear,
stabilise his leadership.
he can do badly everywhere else, but as long as he holds on to London, he's safe.
I think because the others are just priced in, that if he can sort of be seen to notch up one victory, it's a bit like the Oldham and Royston by-election at the end of last year. Everyone assumed that they do really badly. They did well. It was the same result essentially as the general election. It stabilised his leadership.
He'd probably be safe, Isabel, even if he lost London.
Well, I think he would be, because the difficulty that those who would like to see the backing of him have got is that if they're essentially his supporters control the party membership. I think it's an interesting question how this is going to be judged. I spoke to one of Jeremy Corbyn's critics within the parliamentary party this morning and was surprised by how upbeat he sounded. He sort of said, oh, well, I think we might put on a couple of hundred seats. You know, this is a terrible time for the Tory leadership. We've had a really rough few weeks. And then I came off the phone and I thought, hang on a minute, this is all about expectation management. And this is Corbyn's critics saying we should be putting on a few hundred seats. And then when they don't, they will say it's all a big
Setting
disaster.
them up to fail.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the critic is right. I mean, the Tories were expecting to do quite well in these elections. Even in Wales, they were expecting to do well. But then we've had the budget, the Panama Papers, the steel crisis, the bitter splits over the referendum. That's got to take its toll on the Tories.
Well, it manifestly has taken the toll in some of the recent opinion polls, which have shown bare minimum a narrowing Tory lead, and in some cases, Labour pulling ahead. I do suspect a lot of Tories wouldn't mind doing a little bit badly in some of the local elections in England if that relieves the pressure on Jeremy Corbyn, who they absolutely want in place all the way through the next 4 years and contesting the 2020 general election. I agree with Nick. I think that even if they do badly, Jeremy Corbyn, in Scotland and Wales and in England, he really owes a debt to Sadiq Khan, because his likely victory in London, not his certain victory, but judging by the polls, his likely victory, will attract so much more attention than elections anywhere. Not because it deserves to, but because the media has a natural skew towards London. It's a slightly sexier office than a standard local election in the middle of England, and therefore that will drown out any underperformance that Labour have in the rest of the country.
Is it too cynical to think that maybe some Tories won't be too upset if they don't win London because Mr Corbyn will then be secure?
I don't think it's too cynical at all. I think that's absolutely the case, and I think Janan's absolutely right. I mean, there will be an awful lot of post-analysis about how the billionaire's son, Zach Goldsmith, lost the election. That will be where all the coverage goes.
It's interesting that the ultras who want to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party, the window that they're talking about is not after the local elections in May, it's after the referendum at the end of June. But I think we might well be focused on the Conservative Party by then.
Oh, I think that's right. But I think the Tory travails, they could well stop them coming second in Scotland now, which was a possibility, and doing well in Wales, which was also a possibility. That both of these could now take their toll on the Tory performance.
I've been getting away with it all